Let's talk about the moment you realize you were never his priority. That gut-wrenching realization that while you were giving him your time, your energy, your heart, he was weighing his options. He was treating you like a placeholder. And you were busy showing up with love, loyalty, and hope. You were invested. And yet to him, you were just an option. Let me say this loud and clear. You were never the problem. His inability to see your value doesn't diminish your worth. It just exposes his own emotional immaturity and indecisiveness. Now, I know you might be asking yourself, how could he? How could someone take something so rare, so genuine, and treat it like it was replaceable? Here's the truth. People only treat you like an option when you treat yourself like one. Read that again. When you stay available for someone who doesn't show up consistently, when you wait for the bare minimum and pretend it's enough, when you ignore the red flags because you're addicted to the potential, you're not just tolerating poor treatment, you're teaching them it's acceptable. But that ends today. You see, the beautiful thing about waking up to your worth is that suddenly everything changes. You stop chasing people who are running from themselves. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's maybe. You stop waiting for validation from someone who doesn't even know how to value loyalty, presence, or emotional effort. You become the one who walks away, the one who chooses herself. And when that happens, oh, he'll feel it. Trust me, he will feel it. Because, let's be honest, he didn't expect to lose you. Men like that, they count on your kindness. They count on your patience. They count on you being understanding while they give you crumbs and offer full-course meals to others. But there comes a point when a woman says no more. And that's when the shift happens. You stop responding to his half-hearted texts. You stop showing up for late-night conversations that go nowhere. You stop fighting for a spot in someone's life who wouldn't even hold the door open for you emotionally. And suddenly he realizes you were never just an option. You were the best thing he never had the courage to claim. And that's where the pain begins for him. It's not revenge. It's not manipulation. It's not a game. It's simply a natural consequence of your growth. When a man realizes that the woman who loved him so purely, so deeply, the woman who would have moved mountains for him, has now outgrown the version of herself who begged for his time, it hurts. It's not ego pain, it's soul pain, because he knows deep down he had something real and he let it go. Let me tell you what happens next. He'll circle back, maybe in a few weeks, maybe in a few months, maybe even years later, but he'll come back. Not because he's changed, but because he finally understands your absence more clearly than he ever understood your presence. But here's the part I want you to remember. Don't let him back in just because he finally noticed what he lost. You are not a pit stop on his journey of confusion. You are not someone's maybe later. You are the woman who rises. Your life isn't about making him regret. It's about making you proud. And no, this isn't about pretending you don't care. It's not about acting cold or heartless. In fact, it's the opposite. It's about caring for yourself so deeply that you refuse to entertain relationships that drain you. It's about loving yourself enough to close the door on anything that makes you question your worth. So, to the woman listening to this right now, who gave her best to someone who treated her like a backup plan, this is your moment. Not to prove anything to him, but to reclaim everything for you. Walk away with grace, heal in silence, glow with purpose, and grow in power. Because the truth is, his rejection wasn't the end of your story. It was just the universe creating space for someone who will never make you feel like an option. Someone who shows up from the start with clarity, consistency, and courage. But before that person ever arrives, you'll already be whole. Because now you've become the person who chooses herself. And that's where the real power begins. And let's go deeper, because here's the truth most people avoid. When someone treats you like an option, it doesn't reflect your inadequacy. It reveals their emotional immaturity. His inability to recognize what you bring to the table, his habit of keeping you just close enough without ever fully choosing you, is not a measure of your worth. It's a symptom of his own confusion, insecurity, or ego. A real man, one who is ready, one who sees, does not gamble with something rare. He doesn't play emotional hide and seek with a woman who shows up with consistency, depth, and care. So if he overlooked you, took you for granted, or treated your presence like a convenience, that's not proof you weren't enough. It's confirmation that he wasn't equipped to handle the kind of love you offer. And I know how tempting it is to internalize that, to think, maybe if I were a little less intense, a little more chill, maybe if I said less, asked for less, needed less. But no. You weren't too much. You were just too real for someone who preferred comfort over connection, control over commitment. The moment you stop trying to decode his behavior and start recognizing that his actions say everything about where he is in life and nothing about what you deserve, that's the moment you begin to take your power back. His failure to choose you isn't your failure. It's his missed opportunity. Let him carry that. You keep rising. And here's where the shift begins. When you finally realize that people don't just treat you however they want, they treat you how you allow them to. Every time you answered that late night message, every time you forgave the cancellation, the inconsistency, the silence followed by sweet words, you were unintentionally teaching him that this was okay, that he could do the bare minimum and still have access to you. Not because you were weak, but because you cared, because your heart is loyal, because you believed in the connection. But love without boundaries becomes a breeding ground for imbalance. It becomes a place where one person gives and the other takes. And the longer that dynamic continues, the more normalized it becomes, not just for him, but for you. That's why waking up to your worth is more than just walking away. It's about reprogramming your standards. It's about asking yourself, what have I been tolerating in the name of love that doesn't even resemble love? You can't change someone else's behavior, but you can change what you accept. And once you set that new standard, once you decide that your time, your energy, your heart are sacred, you stop entertaining anyone who shows up with confusion, chaos, or convenience. Because the way you treat yourself sets the blueprint for how others will treat you. So if you want someone to respect you, start by respecting yourself enough to stop negotiating your worth for scraps of affection. That's not love, that's survival. And you weren't born to survive someone's emotional inconsistency. You were meant to thrive in real, mutual, grounded connection. And when that shift happens, when you stop teaching people it's okay to play with your heart, something even more powerful begins. You start choosing you, not out of spite, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You realize that your peace matters more than his mixed signals, that your joy is worth more than the temporary high of his attention. You begin to pour the energy you used to spend analyzing his behavior into building a life you actually love. You prioritize your growth, your healing, your passions. You stop waiting for his text and start listening to your own voice. You stop obsessing over why he didn't show up, and you start asking how you can show up better for yourself. That's when things really change. Because now the power dynamic flips. Not because you're playing games, but because you're no longer available for them. You're no longer waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And from that place, where your self-worth isn't hanging on someone else's validation, you attract differently, you live differently, you stop chasing love and start becoming the kind of woman who draws in people that reflect the love you've already cultivated within. And that's not ego, it's evolution. It's the natural outcome of finally realizing that the most important relationship you'll ever have isn't the one that broke your heart. It's the one you build with yourself day by day, decision by decision. And as you begin to build that relationship with yourself, you come to understand something that changes everything. Walking away isn't weakness, It's power in its purest form. Because it's easy to stay. It's easy to cling to the familiar, to hope he'll change, to wait for the apology, the clarity, the breakthrough that never comes. But it takes real strength to choose yourself in a world that romanticizes chasing after people who don't know how to love you. It takes courage to detach from someone you care deeply for, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring enough about yourself. Walking away is not giving up. It's giving in to the truth. And the truth is, love that requires you to abandon yourself isn't love. It's a transaction. It's a cycle of emotional debt you keep trying to repay with your time, your silence, your patience. But the moment you leave that dynamic behind, you reclaim something far greater than a relationship. You reclaim your peace, your dignity, your sense of self. And yes, it might hurt. Yes, there might be nights when the silence feels heavy, when the absence echoes louder than the chaos ever did. But in that quiet, something beautiful starts to grow. Your strength, your clarity, your freedom. And over time, you stop seeing your departure as a loss. You see it for what it truly was, a declaration that you will no longer shrink yourself for someone else's comfort, that you would rather be alone and whole than together and unseen. That's not weakness. That's evolution. That's you rising. And the moment you rise, truly rise, not with noise or dramatics, but with quiet certainty and unshakable peace, that's when he begins to feel it. Because the absence of someone who genuinely cared, someone who brought warmth, consistency, and loyalty into his life, is not something you can easily replace. At first, he might not notice. He might think you'll circle back like before. He might mistake your silence for a temporary pause, not realizing it's the beginning of your permanent absence. But then the messages stop. The calls go unanswered. The familiar comfort of knowing you're always there begins to fade. And suddenly he feels it, not just the silence, but the shift, the emotional distance, the closure you gave yourself. That's the moment it hits him, not because he lost control, but because he lost connection, the connection he never fully honored. He begins to remember all the times you showed up, all the love you gave so freely, all the chances you offered with open hands, and now those hands are gone. Now, he's left to sit with what he took for granted. Because real loss isn't about someone walking away. It's about realizing they were the anchor, the calm, the rare light in your chaos, and you let them go, thinking they'd never leave. That's a pain he created for himself. And you no longer need to carry it, because you've stepped into a version of yourself that no longer settles for being a background character in someone else's indecision. You are the one who left, not in bitterness, but in brilliance. And the echo of that absence will speak louder than anything you could ever say. And eventually, as expected, he comes back, or at least tries to. Because that's what often happens when someone finally realizes the depth of what they lost. But this time, it's different. You're no longer the woman waiting, hoping, longing. You're not holding your breath for his next move. You've breathed life back into yourself. So when he reappears with sweet words, with "I miss you," with "I've been thinking," you don't melt, you don't fall, you listen, not with your heart, but with your healed intuition. Because now you understand something vital. Just because he returns doesn't mean he's ready. Sometimes people come back not because they've grown, but because they miss the version of you who tolerated what they offered. They don't miss who you are now. They miss who you used to be when you accepted less. And that's where your strength is tested. Not in whether you'll hear him out, but in whether you'll protect the peace you fought so hard to find. This time you're not flattered by breadcrumbs. You don't confuse attention with intention. You know that true change takes time, takes action, takes a level of accountability that's proven, not promised. You've outgrown empty apologies. You no longer need closure because you gave it to yourself. So if he comes back, it's not your job to save him from the consequences of taking you for granted. Let him feel the distance. Let him sit in the silence silence he once created, because this time you don't owe him another chance. You owe yourself the freedom to keep moving forward. And that's the thing, you finally stop falling in love with potential. You stop holding on to who he could be or who he was in those fleeting, beautiful moments that made you believe. Because potential is intoxicating. It keeps you hoping. It makes excuses for poor behavior. It feeds on your empathy, your patience, your loyalty. But hope, when misplaced, becomes a trap. And the more you romanticize the version of him that only existed in your imagination, the longer you stay stuck in a relationship that only works in theory, never in practice. You start to realize that loving someone's potential is just a clever way of abandoning your reality. Because the truth is, no matter how much you saw in him, no matter how deeply you believed he could rise into the man you deserved, he didn't. And it's not your job to fix that. You were never meant to be his lesson. You were meant to be someone's match. Someone who's already done the inner work, who doesn't need to be convinced to love you right. You don't have to inspire someone into consistency. You don't have to wait for someone to get it one day. That's not love. That's emotional gambling. And when you let go of the version of him you created in your mind and start facing the version of him that showed up in your life, you see things for what they are. Not what you hoped they would be. That's when you stop settling. That's when you create space for something real. Because love shouldn't be built on promises of who someone might become. It should be grounded in who they are today and how they show up for you right now. And once you release that illusion, once you stop clinging to who he might become, you begin to see the rejection for what it truly was, redirection. What once felt like abandonment now feels like protection. What once hurt like loss now feels like clarity. Because the universe, life, whatever you want to call it, has a way of removing people who aren't meant to stay, not to punish you, but to guide you. It clears the path, even when you're not ready to let go. And in the moment, yes, it feels brutal. It feels like betrayal. But over time, with space and perspective, you come to understand that his failure to choose you was a necessary detour. You weren't being pushed away. You were being pulled forward. Pulled toward a life where you don't have to beg for basic effort, where your presence is appreciated without being tested, where love isn't something you have to prove or perform for. You begin to realize that closed doors protect you from staying too long in spaces that were never built to hold your heart. You see that being overlooked was never a reflection of your lack, but a reflection of what you were willing to settle for. And now you're no longer settling. You're no longer trying to force a connection that was never truly mutual. You're walking with faith, not in him, but in yourself, in your ability to heal, to rebuild, to attract something aligned. Rejection isn't the end. It's the clearing before the breakthrough. It's life saying you deserve more, but you have to stop standing in the way of it. And now, finally, you're listening. And now that you've finally stopped chasing what was never meant for you, something incredible starts to happen. You begin to rise, not for him to see, not so he'll regret it, but because you remembered who you are. The glow up is no longer about proving anything to anyone. It's not about flaunting your success or broadcasting your healing. It's quiet, grounded, intentional. It's in how you move, how you protect your energy, how you speak to yourself in the mirror, how you no longer accept confusion as a form of love. It's in the way your eyes no longer search for answers in someone who couldn't even give you honesty. You glow not because of him, but despite him. Because you've alchemized every tear, every disappointment, every sleepless night into wisdom, into standards, into strength. You've rebuilt from the rubble without bitterness. You've chosen growth over revenge. And in doing that, you've won in the only way that really matters. Not by making him feel your absence, but by making yourself feel whole again. That's the real glow up. Not changing so he regrets losing you, but changing so you stop regretting ever shrinking yourself for him. You've stepped into the light you used to try and shine on someone else. And now, you no longer need to be seen to feel valuable. You know your value. You walk like it. You live like it. And from here forward, your life is no longer a story about who didn't choose you. It's about how you finally chose yourself. So let this be the moment you stop asking why he treated you like an option and start owning the truth of who you are. You are not someone to be picked when it's convenient. You are not someone to be tested, paused, or saved for later. You are the entire experience, rare, powerful, complete. And the day you realize that was the day everything changed. Not because he suddenly saw your worth, but because you did. You stopped waiting. You stopped chasing. You stopped shrinking. And in that stillness, in that self-respect, you found your voice again, your power again, your peace. So no, this isn't about him feeling your loss. This is about you finally feeling your own presence, fully, fiercely, and without apology. And from now on, anyone who wants access to you will have to meet you at the level you now live. Because the woman who was once treated like an option, she's gone. In her place stands someone unforgettable, not because of what she endured, but because of who she became through it. And that is the kind of woman no one ever forgets.